Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Lush Gardener. So in today's video somebody had asked me how to check the moisture in the soil, meaning how to check whether the soil is completely bone dry and how deep the stick should reach in order to get a proper idea if the soil is bone dry or not. Now guys, of course, if you do not want to use the stick, there are some gadgets available online, which is the moisture meter. Now, I don't have an hands-on experience with the moisture meter, so I can give a diplomatic answer because a lot of people have said that it tends to work out really well. Apart from the moisture reading, it also tells you how alkaline and how acidic your soil is. It also has the reading, and it doesn't work on a battery. I'm not very sure how it tends to work out. Yeah, so it doesn't work on the battery. But there is some mechanism that it works through. So as I said, if I have a hands-on experience, I can give you a very short answer. But as I'm not very sure, I can give a very diplomatic answer depending upon the feedback that I've got from people. Some said it tends to work out really well. Some said the readings are not very accurate. But nevertheless, if you don't have it, it's absolutely okay. All you need is a small little stick, be it a wooden stick or a plastic stick, anything. Will work out really well. So I will quickly give you a video tutorial on how you can do that. So you need to take a stick. I will always advise you to go with a stick that is slightly lighter in color. Don't go for a stick or anything that is darker in color or black in color, because you won't be able to understand if the stick is coming out wet or if it's coming out dry. Now, for example, this soil mix is completely bone dry. So you have to take the stick, go from the edge. Do not go in the center, because that's where your succulent is going to be sitting in. There will be roots. So you have to go from the edge like this and reach all the way till the bottom, till you feel that the stick is touching the base or the bottom of the pot. You have to keep it over there and then just pull it out. So you can see this is completely bone dry, and hence you don't see any moisture or water. I don't know if the camera is focusing because it's a thin stick, so it's going to be a little difficult to see, but I'll try my best to focus on it. So you can see the stick is completely bone dry. So you push it deep into the soil, let it touch the base of the pot, and then just pull it out. You have to do it from the edge like this and then just pull it out. So it's going to come out completely clean. This indicates that your soil mix is completely bone dry. Now again guys, depending upon your environment and climate, this is something that I leave it up to you guys. You are a better person to judge whether your soil is completely bone dry or not, because it all depends upon your environment and climate. So over here, my soil mix is completely bone dry. Now just because it's bone dry, it doesn't mean that you immediately go ahead and water it. You can at least wait for another 2 or 3 days, depending upon your environment and climate. For example, my environment is very dry during the summers. So if I happen to see that my soil mix is completely bone dry, I might probably wait for another 2 days or probably 3 days, depending upon how the succulent looks, because the succulent tends to store water in the leaves, so we do not need to be worried. You can absolutely be relaxed if the succulent soil is completely bone dry. The succulent is not going to die. They do store water in the leaves, and they can go without water for another couple of days. Again, this all depends upon your environment and climate. If this was the same case during monsoons and winters, if the soil is completely bone dry, I will wait for another 2 weeks or probably at times 3 weeks, depending upon the variety of succulent. Because during the winters and monsoons, the climate is cooler. During monsoons, there is a lot of humidity, so I do not need to be worried. Even if the soil is completely bone dry, I can still wait for another couple of weeks. But during summers, I don't do that because the environment is very dry. It's very warm. So there is a high chance that the succulent will start getting dehydrated at a much faster rate as compared to the monsoon or the winter season. So during the summers, I tend to wait probably for another day or so, or maybe 2 days, 3 days. And then I go ahead and do a complete watering until the water starts passing through the drain hole. Now, whether it is summers, whether it is winters, whether it's monsoons or any season in your country or in your location, the key thing or the thumb rule remains the same. The soil has to be bone dry, meaning from the upper layer to the lower layer. Now, this was being said about a soil mix that's completely bone dry. Let's check out for a soil that is not completely bone dry, or there is still a little bit of moisture at the base of the pot. We will do a quick check. Now, for example, I have another pot over here. Now if I'm going to take the stick, it looks like the upper layer of soil is completely bone dry. The same thing, we'll take the stick and poke it at the edge until it reaches to the base of the pot, and then just slowly take it out. And you can see from the previous clip, let me focus it again. You can see there is a little bit of moisture and the soil sticking to the stick. So this indicates that the soil is still wet beneath. Gonna take another, and you can see this. The soil is sticking to the base of the stick. Don't know if it is going to focus. That's the most annoying part. Let me focus. And here you can see this. This is going to be much better. You can see there is soil sticking to this wooden stick. This indicates that at the base the soil is still wet or moist. Upper layer, it shows that it's completely dry. This is where a lot of people tend to make mistake. They see that now if I'm going to dig it around, you can see at least couple of inches the soil looks dry, it's loose, but beneath it's still wet. Now if your succulent is sitting in this and the soil is not completely dry at the base, and if you're going to go ahead and water it, the succulent has a high chance of getting rotted because there is still some moisture at the base. So the soil has to be completely bone dry from upper layer till the base. That's when you are ready to water. Again, as I said, you have to wait for another couple of days. It's absolutely okay. The succulent is not going to die. All you have to do is, the thumb rule is that the soil should be completely bone dry. So this was all about it, guys, because somebody had asked me question, how deep should the stick go? So the stick should completely touch the base of the pot, and when you take it out, you can see over here it's wet beneath. There is still a lot of moisture. So now I know a lot of you might have question, this is a little bit too much of every time putting in the stick and taking out. You also have moisture meters available online. You can purchase them. But I would say this is just the initial stage. You don't have to do it every now and then. Probably the initial stage when you're learning about this, you can do this. Now let's say on the second day, you tend to see your stick comes out like this with a lot of moisture, which means that your soil is not completely dry yet on the second day itself. Probably on the third or fourth day, the stick might start to come out dry, provided you have made a very loose, porous, well-draining soil mix that tends to dry faster. If you feel even after a week your stick is coming out like this, that indicates that there is some problem with your soil mix and you definitely need to change, because your soil cannot tend to stay wet for a week or more than a week. That is not a very good sign. That indicates that your soil is taking a very long time to dry. This stage is okay on the second or on the third day. Upper layer of soil is completely bone dry, but there is a little bit of moisture on the second or third day. If this happens, it's absolutely okay. It will take another probably a day or so for it to dry out. But the soil has to be completely bone dry before you go ahead and water it. If you feel even after a week your stick is coming out like this with a lot of moisture, then you definitely need to change or amend your soil mix. Probably you can add a little bit more sand, or you need to add a little bit of gritty material. This is the reason why I said you have to do a soil test method. Imagine your succulent sitting in this, and when you're doing this, even after a week, your stick is coming out like this. It's not a very good thing. So always prepare a soil test method. Do a soil test well in advance before you start planting your succulent, so that you do not have to repot. Imagine having a succulent in this and your stick is coming out wet after a week. You have to repot the succulent because the succulent is at a high risk of getting rotted in that. So you have to be extremely careful. Again, moving the succulent out from this pot is again going to damage the succulent. So it's always better to do the soil test method, which I have already made a video on. If you haven't watched that video, I'll put the link in the description below. You can do that. So once you are all prepared, you will end up with a soil like this, which tends to dry very fast within 3 to 4 days. If the soil tends to dry very fast, then that is going to be the good thing, because then you do not need to repot. This is all avoidable if you are doing the soil test method. If you are preparing everything well in advance, your soil being wet for almost a week, that all things will not happen if you have pre-planned and made your soil mix in advance. And as I said, this testing of the soil is not necessary afterwards. Initially you will have to do it, especially if you are a beginner and you are very scared or very confused about watering. This is one of the method you can do initially. And whenever you're doing this test method, if you're just doing it for the first time, I would say note it down, probably in a book or on a piece of paper, that how long your soil tends to dry. Let's say you have got an hands-on experience that you know that on the 4th day your soil is completely bone dry, then you definitely do not need to use this stick again. You would be very confident that on the 4th day your soil is completely bone dry, and then After 4 days, you can wait for another 2 days or 3 days, depending upon your environment and climate, depending upon the season. You can wait after the soil is completely bone dry. So this is the initial test only. Write it down so that you have a clear idea of when your soil tends to dry. And later on, you do not need this stick. You will have an hands-on experience with it. So guys, that's all about it. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If it was, please hit the like button. And if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing to it. Until then, take care, stay safe, and keep propagating.